I really like it that this is a very interactive session, and essentially my experience is just one data point. There are a lot of people who have achieved far significant success and they have written about it. So the only value I bring is that I'm here and I can answer something. So let's make it interactive. I've got some slides to go through, and I'm going to use them, but it's fairly flexible. My name is Gautam Gupta, and well, I'm a co-founder of CORESPEQ, and I'm acting as the vice president of CORESPEQ. So CORESPEQ is a high-performance computing company. Essentially, what we do is we make tools for some aspects of for certain domains, and then based on those tools, we actually provide high-performance solutions to those domains. And what keeps us alive, because this is a very competitive market, what keeps us alive is for this class of problems, we will give the best code, the fastest code. In HPC, there are fairly objective metrics on what best really means. So we will give the fastest code. That is what keeps us alive as a small business. And I guess when you have a small business and you're kind of in this fairly tough marketplace, you need to have some kind of a proposition like that. So how we got to that was, my background is in research, and we worked on something called the polyhedral model, which was essentially linear algebraic techniques to analyze and optimize a certain class of programs. So we use that to optimize code. It's supposed to be a fairly non-technical presentation, but I'll take about 60 seconds to explain what I mean. The polyhedral model, why it's good is it's not tied to any hardware. The analysis is a linear algebraic analysis. And in that sense, we can go to our clients and we can say, well, we're not trying to sell you a new FPGA solution which costs $20,000. We will go with whatever you have and we'll make it much faster. And that's an easier sales pitch to make. So just to explain a little bit about what I'm saying here. My clients are algorithmicians and domain scientists. Most of the time they come up with specifications of that sort. This is a 1D array, and for every answer of the 1D array, you need to do a double summation. Fairly straightforward. When a programmer looks at it, they say, well, this thing has got 3 loops. The outermost loop is going to go over the 1D array, and then there are 2 inner loops to compute every answer. So as a programmer, we're going to write something like this. It's got 3 loops, 1 for all the answers, and then 2 loops to compute each answer. And that's how my competition typically operates, which is very good for me, because this is an order n cubed computation. For 100 values, you will use order 100 to the cube computations to evaluate it. The way we think is we actually break down the mathematics behind this, and we introduce some other variables, and we write it in a more complicated way, but that's order n squared. So using linear algebra, we analyze computations, and then we actually have to go back to using the same techniques to optimize it on big machines. So being done with this, the technology is hardware independent, but the solution has to be hardware tuned. So then we go and we provide vectorization, we provide CUDA solutions, Hadoop-based solutions, and provide that software. Just as I said, our clients are the algo teams of companies, so these are the domain experts, because we don't bring any domain expertise. We only bring optimization expertise. And what I'm talking about is this company which was bootstrapped. We had no venture capital. What was lucky for me was I was sure that I was not going to get venture capital, so I didn't waste any time there. The reason why we started, and I think the reason why a lot of people start, is they want to make a change bigger than what they can do right now. They're not just motivated by money, because the money is very difficult to come by. So what makes me proud right now is, at this point, there's probably every fab in the world has a few machines that runs my code almost all the time. Every fab in the world. Who am I? I'm a mathematical modeling guy. I did research in compiler analysis and program optimization. And I'm going to come back to that a little later. But essentially, what was the startup idea? I did my research, and I wanted to do something with it. So in 2007, I wanted to make a compiler, not knowing that, at least for the last decade, everybody knew that a compiler business is a failed business. There is no compiler company today. And Golang was the last good one, and it's dead for more than a decade. So I didn't know that. I wanted to build a parallelizing compiler and sell a parallelizing compiler. And the interesting part was I was absolutely sure that we would have a sellable product in 6 months. I was blindly sure. I called a friend up. He works in Chicago. He has a company that does financial trading. And he said, Gautam, whatever you do, prepare for 2 years. And I didn't take that too seriously. So it so turned out that I needed 2 years. We didn't earn a single dollar till the mid-2009. And again, that money didn't come easy. In 2009, what we got a corporation, and that was willing to talk to us. I mean, it was willing to talk to me, because at that point, the company wasn't very big. I'll leave you to guess how big it was. But it was willing to talk to me, and it did not want the compiler. They said that if you come in and you give us optimization, we'll buy, but we want nothing to do with your compiler. They had an incumbent HPC vendor. This is I can't take names because I'm bound by a lot of NDAs, but this was the 800-pound gorilla in the space. And this company, because again, HPC is a very cost-sensitive, very competitive, mature market. So they cared only for performance. And the story was, if you can come in and you can beat this incumbent, then you have the contract. And they knew exactly which technology they wanted. So that was good for me, because in some sense, I didn't have to have a sales pitch other than, well, this is what we can do. But it was bad for me because I'm not a practitioner. I mean, I was a mathematical modeling guy, and they told me a technology they wanted to use, which I had no idea of. I mean, remember, my background was mathematical modeling, and I talk in terms of equations and optimization of equations, whereas what these guys wanted was, we have this kind of mess of code. We'll give you a piece of it. For security purposes, we will strip away all comments. And I want you to make it faster than what my incumbent can do, because that's what's going to get you the contract. So here is my first insight that I want to share. At that point, it was very frustrating. I knew that I had no idea what these guys wanted. So there were two options. One was to say, no, I cannot do that. That's not my expertise. And in which case, I've lost whatever business there was. And the second thing was, I would try, and I would fail. But in which case, the worst thing I could do is I'd lose all the business. So it can't be any worse than what I had in my first option. So I went and I tried to study about the technology. And the insight is, as a small business, and actually as a startup, most of what you start with as an idea is not the idea you end up with. And you have to be nimble. A startup has many disadvantages in this marketplace against bigger companies, against entrenched players. But the only benefit we have is we don't have to answer to anybody to make decisions and to change our plan. And that's when we decided that we were not a compiler company. If we get the contract, we will become a solutions company and a tools company. And essentially, I'll come back to it, but we won that contract. I'm going to talk a little bit about my second insight about what, as a startup, helped me. A lot of these work for startups with VCs also. I mean, find good people is something that everybody says. It is all the more important for a small company without a VC, because first, there's no big brother helping you out with finding good people. And second is, people are the only asset you have. There's no other asset. You don't have money, you don't have bigger computers, you don't have kind of more expensive consultants. So the only asset you have are the people. And that's why, I mean, even though it's cliched now, but I think you have to start even right now, even before you have a startup, you have to start with the collaborations and relationships you have amongst your friends. The other thing that came difficult to me was that one should never work with people who work part-time. You have to jump into the river, and your partners have to jump into the river. What I learned was, if people are not hungry for success in that startup, it will never happen. And then you go start fighting about who worked how much, whether they are committed enough, whether they have something on the side. You should only participate with people who will die if the startup dies. And that's something, it was difficult for me, but I think that's one of the insights I want to talk about, impart today. You have to have people you trust. There's no resources, so there are no resources to manage them. So eventually, if you grow to the size of a business, a profitable business, then you might have to manage them, so you should not take very difficult people to deal with. But to start with, the assumption should be that you don't have to manage them. They will know exactly what needs to be done. Share optimization is something that worries some of my friends, but I think that's premature. Owning 100% of $5 is not saying very much. And you want to grow it big, and between friends, if we are talking about a few percentages here and there, it makes no difference. So we actually won that contract. We were able to beat the incumbent by 30%, and for my client, that was a huge deal. So they overlooked all our weaknesses. They overlooked the fact that we were essentially not even a company at that point. And they said, well, you're hired, here's the contract, and go build a company. So we needed a optimization team, and that's where I'll go back to my first point, my previous point, which is the biggest asset we have are collaborations and people. And so essentially what I did was I went back to school and I said, who wants a job? And there I was able to tap people who I had worked with, who were looking for jobs, who were unhappy with their current jobs. And that was my starting team. Only when I got enough credibility in that circle, now I can hire from places that don't know me anymore personally. So that's the insight. I've talked about it a little bit. About the cash issue, it comes back to people. I needed money for 2 years, and all of it came from friends. I mean, these are people who knew me from my undergrad, and they said, well, we trust you enough to give it back over your lifetime. And that money was so much that I probably would need my lifetime to pay it back. So they were able to give it to me without any contract, without any sign. I'll talk a little bit about contracts in the startup context, because I think they're very useful. But before we go out from the cash issue, I want to talk about how a company without VC is different from a company with VC, with venture capital. Venture capital essentially gets you some height so that you can glide for a while, you can soar for a while before you hit the ground. So with venture capital, you're not immediately concerned about hitting cash positive. When you are flying without venture capital, you should be very concerned with cash flow, extremely concerned with cash flow. So that puts a constraints on the markets you want to target. I mean, clearly, it's there are some markets you should really not target where people don't care so much about getting cash positive. So where people care more about about the time it takes to get big. For Facebook, they were more interested with capturing so many users before they were concerned about making money. Same for Amazon. They were concerned without getting their dominance before they were concerned about making a lot of money. And you don't want to go after those markets. And gaming is another place where you have both cases. If you want to be a game developer, then don't go after MMORPGs, and that's a bad market. People want to get users and subscribers, and they're willing to lose money for the first few years. And you can't afford to do that. Try to do something like tower defense or Angry Birds, which can bootstrap your second big venture, but your first venture has to be more modest.
Sorry, what is MMORPG?
Massively multiplayer online role-playing game. So World of Warcraft is a very popular MMORPG. Essentially, they have of the order of millions of users. They participate in this world, going after adventures and hunts. And these are big endeavors, but more importantly, I mean, in this context, why they are worrisome is that the big time publishers don't care so much about breaking even for the first couple of years. But after, I mean, they're willing to lose money and many tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, till they start making money after like 3 or 4 years. World of Warcraft, I think, has been active for almost a decade now. I think it was 2005 or something when it came out, and it came online and still making the money. And because I'm talking to a group of engineers, I want to touch upon this point. We have a curse, and the curse is that we feel technically competent. The problem with that is we feel that stuff that we're not interested in or that we're not very good at is either useless or it's not relevant to what we want to do, and it's not the clincher, and that's very wrong. It's a sure-shot recipe to get destroyed. So if you want the company to succeed, and after it is successful, if you still want to be a part of it, then there are other people you have to play with. I'm going to talk about 2 people. One is a business lawyer. You have to get a business lawyer, you have to talk to a business lawyer, and then you have to get an accountant. And there are many other people you have to work with, but at least these 2. Business lawyer, a business lawyer is expensive, so you probably have to work with a business lawyer in moderation. But the first thing to realize is that all the contracts that you're making between these very close-knit group and your collaborators and your friends, it's not a trust issue. I mean, you trust your friends, but the exercise of putting something down on paper tells people exactly what they're signing up for. And you'd be surprised how often the best friends realize that they did not agree on the same thing. It's just writing 3 pages of this is what I expect, this is what you expect, this is what the company is going to do, is going to make you fight it out when it's a good time, rather than like a couple of years later when you really don't have a paper to go back to. So it helps you flesh out your ideas, and it gives you a reference, and both of them are very important. Like I said, a business lawyer is expensive, and they're also there to make their sale. So of the many documents that they want you to work on, I would push towards 2. I mean, the 2 you absolutely need to get from the business lawyer. One is the stock agreement, which is who owns what, and how does the stock mature, how does it vest, how many years do you have to work. You don't want to leave that as a verbal contract. And the second thing is the proprietary information and inventions agreement, which is what does the company own, and what are the co-founders allowed to do, and what are the employees allowed to do. It's very common for employee to get into a problem with employees, but what's more worrisome is when the co-founders start haggling about who owns what and who brought in what IP. And I think these 2 documents, my business law is $350 an hour, so we're still talking about a couple of $1,000s here, but that is money well spent. So I'll try to wrap this up quickly, but of course, I talked a little bit about operations, which is you have to understand the business lawyer and you have to understand the work of the accountant. But what's most important is sales. More important, I don't know most, but companies found in 3 things: sales, operations, and delivery, and sales is very important. And from the get-go, you need to have a salesperson, or you should have one of the co-founders who knows that it's responsibility to make the sale, if not an active salesperson.
Yeah, you can open up for Q&A.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just take a few more minutes.
Yeah, okay.
An accountant, accounting is logic and arithmetic, which I think we can learn if you're amenable to it. But then it's a lot of laws. So I would suggest that you eventually want to go and have an accountant for your company. But if you're just starting and you're running you're running with very little cash, then just buy QuickBooks and spend 5 hours on it and download your bank statements. It'll after 5 hours, you'll have a good idea of what double accounting really means, or at least what it means in your limited context. So that can get you started for the first few months. There's some very helpful online tools that you could use. Other thing, you are hiring these people, but you eventually have to understand everything they do. I mean, the business lawyer is going to give you some boilerplate document, but you have to tune it to your context. And so you will have to be a student, a perpetual student when you're in a startup. You have to learn all that stuff. You have to learn business law. You have to learn accounting. You have to learn sales. And that's the fresh part of starting up, but that's also the part that's difficult for us to accept. I'm going to go quickly over this. Ask for a lot of advice from everybody. When you have a venture capital, he's sitting there and he's got the authority to give you advice. When you start without venture capital, you don't have that person. So just go out, ask for a lot of advice. Take only what resonates, because a lot of people are going to tell you that it's not worthwhile. And you have to really believe in your idea, because I mean it's that self-concept that's going to guide you through. Contingency planning: people get pregnant if you're founding with a lady. Somebody quits. Somebody gets hit by a bus, but they still want to be a part of the company. So you do contingency planning. It happened to us that one of my core guys wanted an H-1B. He went back to India, and now he's stuck there. So what that required us to do was set up an India company and start working with him from that company in India. I have more things to talk about what a board structure should be for H-1B if the co-founder needs an H-1B. It's not very easy, and I've got some experience there. I've got something to talk about green card. I don't know if you care for it, but getting a green card when you're an entrepreneur is extremely difficult. India operations is
Ask questions.
So for a guy who has an H-1B, what are the difficulties he would eventually face while starting out in startup, from the eligibility of staying in USA point of view?
So the laws were revised recently. They're a little better now. You can be a founder, and you can even be a majority owner of a company and have your H-1B sponsored by the company. The requirement is somebody should have the authority to fire you. And that's a very fun thing, because the way a company operates is the shareholders elect the board members appoint the officers, and then let's say the CEO if you're not the CEO, appointed you or signed your employment contract. Now, if you're the biggest shareholder of the company, then you can, after all, fire all these people, and you could be the CEO of the company and the board member. So it's a little circle in that sense, but the big requirement is the USCIS needs to see if there's somebody who has the authority to fire you. If you are the CEO, then you need to have a board where you don't have total control. So you need a board of 3 where you're just one of them. If you're not the CEO, then it's a little better, but then your CEO has the authority to fire you.
Question: this finding the team without the money, right? People have to work with you for 1 or 2 years, and everybody wants the money. And suppose you're hiring 4 or 5 engineers, especially in US based, that's about $500,000 expense every year. So how did you handle that? Everybody working free or what?
No, make a product that I can do for the most part, and borrowed money, and work with people who want to be a part of the company rather than employees. So work with co-founders.
But they working free or co-founders?
No, I was paying somebody. I was paying a little bit of money to other people, but they were very cheap because they wanted more stock. They wanted to be co-founders. Yes.
I'd like to add a point. So I had my own consulting business for 3 years before my IBM days. So always I had a retainer lawyer, So when I have to go for my CAD or database projects, I'll get contract, they'll say, who are you? Can you trust you? So, any kind of statement of work you give or something just get verified by a lawyer, that gives a lot of authenticity. And keeping a lawyer on a retainer basis is not that expensive.
Right.
And he has to review your document maybe 10, 20 pages once in a month or twice in a month. That's very cheap.
Understand.
If you plan it right, it's not expensive.
I understand.
I want to add something here about legal issue. It's very expensive, I understand. And I've been doing some my own for almost 14 years. This was the biggest challenge when I started my business. So what happened was, I went to one of in a similar group in Detroit. I got introduced to prepaid legal service.
That's bad.
I tell you what, some people have bad experience. I've been having that service for the last 14 years. I paid $25, and what happens is this: I got into litigation with few people, and then for $25 you get the amount of service which you can never get from a small attorney. Because here for $25 you get to about 100 people attorney office. They're there to support you for each the problem you have. Okay, I've been seeing that it's most useful versus spending $4,000 or $5,000, and then you don't know what whether you really need such kind of content or not. But this $25 really, they will review your legal documents. They will guide you.
Because I've used prepaid legal, I'm still a member. I have the experience. In some cases, they will refer you to another lawyer local to Bay Area.
That is correct, yes.
But that's only 85% of the daily hour. $300 will cost you $250. And still it's up to local lawyers how much you charge you. They will
Still, because not to interrupt you, but this seems to be a nice discussion over dinner.
Yeah.
If there is any last question for Gautam,
Yes.
let's finish this up.
Sir, I just
Sorry.
want to, first of all, thank you for valuable information. I just wanted to ask you, what are the challenges in setting up a company in India? Because we're trying, we're not able to come back here after we are set up a organization here. So what are the challenges and what does it take?
So, first challenge is you need to find somebody who's willing to be a partner in India. You can always tap into friends and family. With family, you have to be careful. If it's a lineal relationship, if it's your father, then this company is not significantly detached from you. And so that can lead to some taxation and accounting nightmares later. But if you have a brother or a cousin who has this other company in India, then that's better. That's what I did. I went to family, and then once you have your vendor in India, then things can be done. As long as this person in India has the capacity to operate remotely, fairly independently. I think it was fairly simple from just having a vendor in India perspective, but there's some pitfalls for which you should know the law. Like I said, the linear relationship can be a nightmare.
Do you have data in here that is accessibility?
So that's what I mean. I did not want to do that. I did not want to take up on that. So I did not go for one of these closely connected companies. If you don't mind declaring that and working through the paperwork for that, then it could be anybody. There are many ways to do it. The easy way is have your cousin help you out.
So please give a big applause to